Time I was here, we talked about grammar, usage, sentence structure, right? Now, I want to do like those, how to answer the harder questions. So the idea basically is they're not rules anymore, they're processes. So we're going to talk about how do I answer a hard question, or like a quote unquote hard question. Because they're not actually hard, you just have to think. They're not going to be like rules that you can just apply and it's done. You have to actually be able to think through these now. So yeah, let's just get into it. Basically, there's going to be 3 types. I'll tell you what the types are, how to answer them, and then we're just going to practice. We're just going to watch and look for those examples like actually in a test. So, okay. Is this visible? Online, can you guys see? Is this like cut off? No, you can see. Okay. Okay, first things first. How do you know which questions are hard? Or quote unquote hard? When they're not like hard questions or they're not fitting into these categories, you can normally answer them with a rule. So like those last few weeks we've been talking about these different rules, you're just going to apply those. Now if it fits in one of these categories, you can't just rule it and be done. You have to think about it and apply a process. So how do you know you have to do that? Well, there's 3 types of questions you're going to be looking for. The first type is a top-heavy question. Top-heavy questions are basically questions that have a specific revision task. They're going to tell you what to do, and then you just have to do it. So these questions... Let me actually say specific revision test. That'll make it. Okay, these questions have a specific revision task associated with them. And you just got to follow that revision task, and that's how you do these. We'll talk about the exact process with each of these questions, but I just want to show you what they are first. So an example of one of these would be like, it might say like, which of the following answer choices makes it clear that the author is excited? And then it'll give you 4 answer choices. And then you're just going to pick the one that makes them the most excited, basically. So it'll tell you what to do, you just have to do it. The next type, organizational. Organizational question. Okay. An organizational, it's a big word. An organizational question is pretty self-explanatory. It's going to ask about the organization of something. It's going to ask about changing the order of, well, it could change orders of a lot of different things. It could change the order of words, phrases, sentences, paragraphs even. So I'm just going to leave it like that. Changing the order of stuff is what's happening. And then these questions might say, they include a lot of things. They might say something like, if the author's considering adding the following phrase, where should they put it? And it'll give you like point A, point B, point C, point D, and it'll show you 4 different points to put it. Okay, and then you have to think about where exactly does it fit. So that's like an example of an organizational question. And then the third type, these are kind of like 2 types of questions, but I group them together because the process you're going to use to answer them is pretty much the same. So these are, again, they're based on processes, right? They're not based on rules. So if these 2 have kind of the same process, I'm just going to put them together. So they are relevance or meaning questions. So pretty self-explanatory, right? All of these are named super well because they are exactly what they are. So it's basically going to check if a word or a phrase is relevant. And what is its relevance? That's one thing that can happen. You could also get something that's, how do I say this? It just like asks about the passage as a whole, if it meets a certain goal. So ask if the passage meets a goal. Have you been doing like a bunch of practice tests? This is normally the last question of a passage. You know, where it's like, suppose the author's goal had been to write blah blah blah. Does this meet whatever? And then those questions are going to be yes because, no because, no because. Do you remember those? They're normally the last, like question 15, question 30, question 45. A bunch of those are going to be like that. You've all seen these before? This makes sense? Online, this much makes sense? These are just the types of questions. Yeah. Sweet. All right. Now you saw that you have a hard question. Okay, you've recognized this top heavy. Now what do you do? Okay, let's talk about how to answer each of these situations now. Okay. How do we answer hard questions? Okay. Start with top heavy again. Okay. Top heavy questions work out really well because this is the one where I can spoon feed you an exact process. And you can follow the exact process and you're going to do fine. Forgot to say this before I started this section, so I'm going to say it now. I promise you, for some of you, what I'm about to tell you to do is going to seem like overkill and it's going to feel like you shouldn't do it. You don't have to do it. And for the most part, that's true. You probably don't have to do everything I'm telling you. You could probably do fine on this test without doing anything that I'm going to tell you to do. You don't have to follow these processes. Just telling you, if something else works for you, that's fine. However, these are battle tested, in the actual test tested. Promise they're going to work solutions to how to do these types of questions. It may seem like overkill, it may seem like you don't need to do all the little things, but please just trust me, this is going to make it easier. I'm not here to try to make your life harder. I'm trying to make this thing easier for you, and if you practice like this, it's going to get easier on the actual test. So excuse me. I don't know if Manoj just talked about this at all with you guys, but basically it's really easy to do good on a practice test. It's not so easy to do good on the actual test. There's a lot of other factors at play, like pressure and time is different. You're in a new environment. It might be too cold in that room. All these different things may be going on. There's just a lot on your mind. So these things are basically just a way to minimize mistakes. This is just a thing that you know how to do these questions. I know you can answer them. It's just a way to make sure you don't get them wrong. You don't miss questions that you already know are right. I don't want you to make mistakes here, right? So trust me. Do these things. It's going to make your life easier, I promise. Okay. So when you get to a top-heavy question, highly recommend this process. There's only let's say 3 steps, basically, that you have to follow. You should get this right every time. Okay. First step is underline the revision task. So like I said, every single top-heavy question comes with a task. It's going to tell you exactly what to do. The problem is we always forget. Every single time there's a top-heavy question, you're going to forget what to do. Because as an editor, normally your job is just to pick the thing that sounds best or grammatical or whatever. That's not really what we're doing here. The idea is they're going to tell you what to do. So underline that part to make sure that sticks in your mind. Okay, this is what I'm doing. I'm looking for what's most funny. I'm looking for the funniest answer. I'm looking for the longest answer. I'm looking for the shortest answer. Whatever. It'll tell you what to look for. The second part, equally as important, is forget everything else. So normally when you go through a test and you have a question, you think about a lot of things. You might think about punctuation. You might think about, is the word choice good? Am I repeating myself? Am I following the economy rule? Am I doing all these different things? None of that matters now. Forget everything I've ever said to you. All of the rules, you can break them if you want to, as long as you're following the revision task. So forget literally everything else. And then the third thing is answer the question, basically. So the first two steps are a way to prep your mind. You're going to underline the revision task, and you're going to forget everything else, and then you can answer the question. Super important that you do these things first, and then answer the question. If you try to answer the question and then try to go back, you've already defeated the purpose of doing this whole thing. So remember to underline and tell yourself, okay, nothing else matters other than this. I still do this to this day when I practice with you guys. I'm telling myself, okay, forget everything else. This is all I'm looking for. And then you can do it. Does that make sense to everybody? I'll show you examples once we get to practicing. Online, does that make sense? Yeah. All right. Has everyone had time to write this down? I'm about to erase it. Everyone had time to write it? You guys are good? Online? Am I good to erase? Okay. So that's top-heavy questions. What about organization? Okay, now it's not going to be like a bullet-pointed list of like, do this, then do this, then do this. Like I told you with top-heavy. It was pretty bullet pointed, right? You could do this, then you do this, then you do this. This is not going to be like that. Organization is more about, it's like a puzzle almost. There's going to be like things and they're going to ask you, okay, well, does this order make sense? Does this order make sense? Does this order make sense? There's just a few tips I can tell you here. So the first thing you can do is look for pairs. What do I mean by look for pairs? Okay, well, let's say an example of an organizational question may be, it's a 3-sentence paragraph. Sentence 1, sentence 2, sentence 3. And the question may say, okay, pick the best order of the sentences. So it may go 1, 2, 3, it may go 3, 2, 1, it may go 2, 3, 1, it may go 1, 3, 2, whatever. I'll give you 4 different options. Now you have to decipher which one of these is the best order. Okay, well, the best thing you can do is look for a pair. So let's say I see in sentence 1, they're talking about something that is very related to sentence 3. Well, that's a pair. Those things should probably be together, right? So I know that it has to go 1, 3. Okay, well, now if I pair those together, there's only one answer choice that makes sense. So look for things that kind of fit together like that, especially with sentences. And I'll show you examples with words too once we get into practicing of how you can do that. So we're going to look for pairs. Another thing we can do is look for events. What do I mean by events? Well, there's a really funny thing the ACT does and tries to trick people. It's not really a trick, but people fall for this all the time where there's going to be a few sentences basically talking about something happening, and it's like a history passage of some sort. And they say like, yeah, well, in 1929 this happened, and then a sentence later they'll say, yeah, but in 1927 this happened. That makes no sense. Why would you talk about, if we're going in chronological order, why would you talk about, oh, this happened in 1929, and then this happened in 27? That's not right? So it should be the other way around. So if they give you specific events like that, and they give you a date or something, well, then put them in order. They shouldn't go out of order, right? So that's another thing that can make these kind of things easier. Another thing is transition words. So if we have words like also, well, that's not going to be the first word of a sentence, or the first word of a paragraph or a list, right? You wouldn't say also and then introduce the thing, right? Also has to come after. Or maybe it's something like, for example. Okay, well then you're going to be an example of something. So what's the something? We can go back and figure out what that is. So these will just help you place things in order. And another thing, Do you guys, like, in English classes, do your teachers make you write, like, 5-paragraph essays? You've done, like, the intro, body, conclusion. You've all heard of that, right? Like a little sandwich essay. Well, paragraphs kind of work the same way. For the most part, paragraphs are supposed to be built where they go topic sentence or introduction sentence, and then some details about that, and then a conclusion sentence or like a transition sentence to the next thing. So that can be helpful sometimes too, is just remember paragraphs for the most part go topic, details, and then transition or conclusion. They kind of always fit in that mold. I mean, they won't always, but this is just a thing to help you if you get stuck. You can just kind of, okay, well, I see that this one says first lead, blah, blah, blah. Well, that's probably going to go at the beginning because that's probably the topic sentence. And then if you see a bunch of detailed stuff, probably not going to be the topic sentence. It's probably going to go here. So, yeah, this can just be a helpful way of organizing things in the correct manner. Does that make sense? So, again, I can't give you an exact process of how to do these. I'll see what I can give you for strategies once we actually see these questions in practice, but these are just some tips that can help you when you're looking at these types of questions. Online, are you guys good? You got this? Yeah. Did I see someone raise their hand a minute ago? Did someone do it on purpose or? All right. Cool, whatever. All right. Last type of situation. Now we've got relevance and meaning. Okay, we're back there. The way you handle relevance and meaning is basically imagine without. I'm going to just say that. Imagine without. Okay, what do I mean imagine without? Well, sometimes it'll be like talking about a specific thing, like a sentence, and it'll be like if the author were to remove this sentence, the essay would primarily lose what? And then you have to figure out what the what is. So what I would do in those situations is imagine that same paragraph or that same sentence or the same whatever without that thing. Read it that way. Okay, now what feels different? So compare like, okay, I read it this way, this is what I felt like. I read it this way, this is what I got. Okay, what's different now? What am I missing? And that way you can answer those questions pretty easily. And then another thing you should always remember is refer back to your main idea here. If you refer back to the main idea, you're setting yourself up for success like 99% of the time on these types of questions. Especially that last question, you know, that question 15 or that last one of a passage where it's like, did the passage accomplish a certain goal? Well, then just think back to the main idea. What exactly happened in this passage? What am I even talking about? And then try to answer that question. And then also, another thing, this is especially in those situations where you have a yes because, no because, no because. Don't look at the answers. When you see the question, literally stick your hand there, cover the answers. Go like, okay, does this fit this goal? Then you should think to yourself, does this fit this goal, yes or no? You answer first, yes, no. If you say yes, don't read the answer choices that say no. Just cross them out. If you say no, don't read the answer choices that say yes. This is going to help you a ton because I wonder, maybe Lily did this today. Did Lily talk to you guys about trap answers? Did she mention that today? Like in the reading test where there's like trap answers. Don't fall for those. They're trying to trick you. A couple weeks ago. Okay, dang, I thought I had it right. But anyway, there's going to be trap answers only on these types of questions on the English test. They're trying to trick you. And they normally put them with the opposite answer. So if the answer is yes, they're going to say no because and give a super convincing explanation. But the no part is what's wrong. So if you just cross it out before you even start, you're eliminating your chance of getting something wrong because you're being silly, basically, or you're falling for their trap. So, yeah. Does that make sense? These strategies make sense? This process makes sense? Online, does that make sense to you guys? Alrighty. Let's apply it. Let's try practicing. Okay, let's go back to this book. Does everyone have this with them? Awesome. Do you remember what page did we start on last time? We started an English test. Does anyone remember what it was? I have no idea. Did we talk about the ivory-billed woodpecker? Was that it? Might have been it. Will you check? Will you go to 427? Quick. Tell me if that's the right one. That might be it. I can't remember though. Did we do passage 1 there? Does someone know online? Do you guys remember what passage we did last week? Nothing on that one? Oh my lord. Which one did I do? I did one of these with you guys. I can remember that. Is it 3:45 per chance? If not, we can just do that one. Okay. Everyone, let's go to 345. Page 345. It should be passage 1 of a new English test, and it should be called Michigan's Mesmeric Stone. Mesmeric? I don't even know what that means. Can everyone see the clock okay? Can you guys see it? Kinda? Yeah, alright. Alright, cool. So, we're going to do questions 1 through... Does someone have a question?
Yeah, okay, so are we using the bubble sheet, or...
You can... Up to you. I'm fine if you just want to circle them for now, just because we're practicing, but... Yeah, so we're just going to... I'll have this timer, we'll run it to 9 minutes, like you're normally going to have on the actual test. We'll go through question 15, and then stop. And then I'll bring everyone together at 9 minutes, and then we'll talk about the passage. Everyone understand what we're doing? All right. I'm going to start the timer. Online, can everyone check that you're muted? I don't know if everyone's muted here. Here we go. All right. that's about 9 minutes there. We'll go over the answers from 1 to 15 here in a second, but I just want to warn you guys, this book in general runs easier than the actual test. So there's not normally as many of those hard questions. The tests normally go a little bit faster than the actual test. For anyone who's actually taken it before and then does these, you'll know these aren't the most accurate in the world. They're very good practice, but the actual test is a little bit harder than this. So just warning you, don't try to use these tests as a predictive measure. And if you're running like super ahead on time, like you finished that in like 6 minutes, don't be like alarmed that like, whoa. The actual test will take you a little bit longer. So just warning. Okay, let's go through answers. I'll read them off starting at 1. Is everyone ready? All right. Question 1 was C. 2 was H. 3 was B. 4 was H. 5A. 6H. 7D. 8G. 9A. 10H. 11A. 12F. 13B. 14H. 15D. Does anyone need any of those repeated? Everyone heard them? Okay.
Did you say that the last one was D or B?
D. D as in dog. Okay. Before I open it up for everyone to ask whatever they want to, I just want to mention the ones that fit into what we did, and we'll talk about how exactly to apply the processes that we just learned. So, for example, where was the first one? Number 5. Let's all flip to number 5 quick and read with me here. So the sentence says, which choice would best help to establish that Petoskey? I don't even know how to say that. Petoskey, maybe? Petoskey stones vary from one to another. Or from one another, sorry, jeez. So this is a top-heavy question, right? It's telling you exactly what to do. You just have to actually do it. So I would underline that revision task, first things first. Okay, which choice best establishes that they can vary from one another? So I would underline here, vary from one another. Okay, now of these answers, which one makes it clear that these stones aren't the same? They need to be variable. So if we say A, but some also contain quartz and all these other materials. Okay, well, some contain them and some don't. That means they can vary from each other. So A seems logical. B says which contains some. Well, that doesn't show that they're different. That just shows that, well, all of them contain some of this, right? C, which predominantly possess. Okay, again, no difference, right? And D says, and also include. Same thing, right? Same problem. That doesn't make them any different. So A is the only one that follows the revision task, so A is the correct answer. That doesn't mean A sounds the best or flows the best or whatever. It just means it fits the task. That's why it's the correct answer, right? Question number 11 is an organizational question where we're trying to move a sentence to make it fit. And in this case, the pair is literally exactly where it is. Where it is the best choice. So if you were to apply any of those organizational rules we talked about, it just sits right where it needs to be. So that one was A. 14 is a relevance or a meaning question where it says the writer's considering deleting the sentence. If it were deleted, the paragraph would primarily lose what? So it's basically asking, what is this sentence doing? Like, what's the meaning of this sentence? So if we read the preceding sentence, it says, where does it start? Generally, early spring will bring in a new crop of stones after the ice is melted on the stones and blah, 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 blah. Okay, so it would lose what? Well, this is definitely F, not an introduction to the essay, right? That's clear. It's definitely not a summary of the passage, or the preceding paragraph, excuse me. H, an important detail supporting the main idea. Seems logical. It's a detail at the end of the day. And J says the conclusion. That sentence is not the conclusion, right? There's still more to come after it, so not J. So the correct answer there would be H. And then 15. Exactly like I said, right? This last question is going to be a yes because, no because, another relevance or meaning question. So it says, suppose the writer had chosen to write an essay about living near the Great Lakes, would this fulfill the writer's goal? Okay. Cover up the answer choices. If I think about the main idea, would I say that this is appropriate? That the author wrote about living near the Great Lakes? No, right? That's not what this is about. So let's eliminate right away. A and B are gone. So let's pick between C and D. Which one of these is a more logical explanation? C says because the writer discusses only the state of Michigan and not the Great Lakes in general. Doesn't really make a ton of sense. D says because the essay is primarily about this specific type of stone and not living near the lakes. Well, yeah, the main idea is the stone. We're talking about the stone this entire time. So what is the best answer here would be D. Does that make sense? So that's how we're able to like apply these processes to answer these types of questions. Okay. Does anyone have questions? Which ones would we like to go over? Everyone got 100% on everything else.
Number 8.
Number 8. All right, let's look at number 8. Okay, so this is a transition word question here, right? So the sentence before, when you have a transition word, normally you want to look at the relationship between stuff. So right before and then right after. What are we talking about here? So right before it says, let's just read the whole paragraph here. Okay, some rock collectors might be fortunate to find a stone naturally polished by wind, sand, water. In many cases, though, the stones are not exposed to the elements, so some hard labor might be necessary to produce a smooth, shiny surface that displays the unique pattern. Despite this, the calcite contained in the stone is highly conductive to hand polishing. Okay, so let's think about the two things that we're basically relating. Previously, we said the sentence right before the underline thing says hard labor might be necessary to make the smooth surface, right? And then after that, it says, well, actually, it's conductive to hand polishing. So I would say the best thing to say there would be like, yeah, it's really hard. Fortunately, this makes it easier. So I could see maybe why you would go with despite this. I don't like instead or nevertheless at all. So I could see maybe you could make a case for despite this, but fortunately just makes more sense here. So yeah, I would go. Does my explanation make sense, or did you pick A? Whoever asked the question.
Yeah, I picked A.
Yeah. I don't think that's unreasonable, but I think when you're looking at a specific, despite this is normally a contrast relationship, I think that's why it's not, you want it to be like direct contrast of something. Or like, if you could plug in anyway, and it still makes sense, then I would choose despite this. But if you plugged in anyway, it wouldn't really make sense. So I think fortunately is a better choice here. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
I don't think you should feel too bad about that one, though, because that's a reasonable... Picking F there is much more reasonable than picking H or J. So that's not a bad miss by any means. Okay, does anyone else have questions that they were surprised to get wrong? Nothing. I quick want to mention number 1 if no one has any other questions. It's kind of a great example of what we talked about, right, of not repeating yourself. Right away, right in your face, you just open the test and it says, some residents of Michigan would probably be surprised and shocked. Oh, well, that totally violates what we're talking about, right? We should never repeat ourselves. Surprised and shocked is silly. You don't want to say, doesn't mean the same thing, right? So don't repeat yourself. That one's supposed to be C. Okay, let's do one more. Let's go from question 16 to 30, that next passage. I'm going to try to push you on time just a little bit here. I'm going to give you 8 minutes instead of 9. Shouldn't be anything too crazy. But yeah, is everyone ready? All right, let's go. 8 minutes. Just stopped you a little early so we'd have time for questions and stuff, but so don't worry if you didn't finish there. Okay, we're starting at where is the start? Where'd it go? Starting on 31, is that correct? Or did I skip a passage? Starting on 16, right? Okay, my bad. All right, starting from question 16, the answer is F, 17C, 18H, 19D, 20F, 21A, 22J, 23C, 24F, 25A, 26J, 27B, 28G, 29A, and 30H. Okay. Just quickly want to mention the so-called hard questions. I won't walk through them, but unless someone wants me to. 19 is one of those, kinda, where it's like not acceptable. That's like kind of a... I like to think of those as kind of like top-heavy, but not fully, because they still should be able to be answered by a rule, but they're asking you a task. 21 is top-heavy, 24 is top-heavy, 25 is top-heavy, lots of those. 27's kind of a mixture of organization and relevance, but I would call that organization. But yeah, okay, what do we got? Which ones were hard on this one?
24.
24. Here we are. Okay. 24 says, given that all the following are true, which sentence, if added here, would provide the most effective support for the statements made regarding the night sky? So this is a top-heavy question, right? It told you it wants the sentences that provide the most effective support for the statements about the night sky. So let's go see, what does it say about the night sky? It's almost completely dark now, aside from the massive blanket of stars that lingers over our head. Okay, so it's almost completely dark. There's a lot of stars. We need to support that, basically. F says the moon is not out tonight, so the stars shine and the Milky Way appears. Okay. G says the cloud cover overhead makes the night seem much darker. Well, it doesn't make sense for there to be a massive blanket of stars and some cloud cover. Doesn't make any sense. H says the night air is beginning to have a hint of a chill, and we're thinking about our warm blankets inside the cabin. That doesn't really support... I mean, they may be true, but it doesn't really support anything about the night sky, right? And then J says the clear sky finds it difficult to give way to the dark shadows of the night. I don't think that's true because it just talked about stars being... And it says it's almost completely dark, right? So it's not completely dark. So I would say F makes the most sense there. The moon is not out tonight, which makes the stars shine brighter. That kind of fits in with what we said right before it. So everything's dependent on the sentence I said before because that's what the revision task was. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay, awesome. Did anyone have trouble with 22? Okay, I figured that one would trip some people up. So it actually wants you to realize there's a split in topic there, like they're changing the topic. So F is not fine because of, that's a grammatical thing, I think. Yeah, so that's a grammatical thing because do you see that comma right before the evening? So that, if we were to read this, basically, let's analyze the clauses before and after that comma. So before the comma, the sky darkens and the last diurnal, whatever, winged creature takes to its bed. That's an independent clause, right? That can sit by itself. The other part, the evening air begins to welcome the blah, blah, blah. Again, independent clause, right? So we have two independent clauses. Can those be separated by a comma? Can you separate two independent clauses with a comma? No, you can't. Yeah. So it can't be F, right? Even though F sounds good, that's a grammatical error. It can't be F. G says which the night sky darkens, and it just doesn't really make sense to say which is the first. So not G. H says the sky darkens. Again, the problem there is we would have two independent clauses, right? And then J says, okay, begin a new paragraph, regardless, as the night sky. So now that comma makes sense. So now we have a subordinating clause, comma, independent. Does that make sense? So the trick there was just grammar, not the paragraph. I've seen them do this recently more. They never used to do this, but they're trying to like put in extra information to make you think about like, oh, well, it's something to do with the paragraph, but it has nothing to do with the paragraph. It was the grammar that they wanted you to look at. So yeah, that's kind of a tricky one. So I figured more people would get tripped up by that, but you guys did pretty good. Did anyone have any other ones that were hard, confusing, don't know what to do, have no idea why it's wrong? Nothing? All right. Then I will let you guys go. Thank you.